Firstly, for reference, I was a 17-year-old female in this story. Secondly, this is my first post on Reddit. So please be kind to me. And lastly, I hope I've done this in the right place, lol. Okay, so about 3 years ago, I went on a holiday with my boyfriend and his family. It was lovely. Long hot days on the beach, exploring the cities and swimming in the ocean. But I'm thinking of one particular night. My boyfriend and I had hung out with his stepsister most of the holiday. She's a year younger than us and likes getting drunk. Despite the fact that she annoyed us by following us all the time, we still hung out with her. So this one night, she suggested that we go and find a club. I state that neither she nor am I old enough. Only my boyfriend could get in, but nonetheless, we are walking to the other side of the island to get to this club. We were all pretty drunk. I fell over several times along the journey. So we finally get to this club, only to see all the people leaving it. We didn't realize it was around 2 a.m. and it looked like the club was shut down. A bit disappointed, we look to a McDonald's and suggest that we refuel there. I go inside and order, but tell my boyfriend and his sister that I need some air. I go outside for a cigarette. I'm smoking when a black car pulls up into the taxi space on the road. I have the idea that we may as well get a taxi back. I'm hurting from falling down and I'm very drunk. How much for a taxi to blank hotel name? I ask him. €10, he replies. Now the problem was I only had €5. I said to the man, please, will you drive us for 5? We are from the UK and we don't know here very well. So this man says, for you, €5. My boyfriend and his stepsister come out of the McDonald's with the food and they see me talking to this man. I tell them he's a taxi man, that he's taking us back. The taxi man is surprised to see them and he says he didn't know I was with friends, but come on, hop in. We were all about to get into the car. Stepsister and I in the back and my boyfriend in the front. When the man requests I sit in the front. I had wanted to sit in the front anyway, and me being very drunk and stupid, please forgive my lack of intelligence in this story, I decided to just comply and go in the front, despite my boyfriend's protests. So for the first part of this journey, everything's good. We are all chatting and laughing together and the taxi man is joining in. We have music on the radio and I am looking out the window at the wonderful oceanside views. Plus the cool air is nice on my hot drunken face. We're all continuing chatting away and the taxi man is being friendly, asking us questions about the UK and just generally making conversation. We all started laughing and chatting away again and he takes my hand. His right hand on the wheel. Bear in mind, this man is probably about 50 and very chatty, so I thought nothing of it. He was being very friendly. Throughout our conversations, he is holding my hand every now and then. I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable, but I shrug it off. But it progresses. He placed my hand on his thigh, holding it tight in his hand. I move over on my seat away from him, but he keeps my hand there. I turn around and see the stepsister, and she mouths, "Are you okay?" I nod. Because the man has now let go of my hand. I see the stepsister whisper something to my boyfriend, and they go quiet for a minute. Seeing as he let go, the conversation continues. I can see we're getting closer to our hotel, and I'm wishing for us to be there quickly. This man takes my hand again. This time he places it on my thigh, and his hand is holding mine tightly. I'm feeling very vulnerable at this point, and I'm wearing short, tight vest dress. I immediately clamp my legs together, and I'm frozen silent. My boyfriend notices and says, "Mate, take your hands off for now." The man laughs and says, "Friendly, I'm being friendly." He continues keeping his hand on my thigh. At this point, my boyfriend and his stepsister are saying, "Stop it, pull over." But he says we are close to the hotel now. I feel sick, the alcohol creeping up my stomach and throat. The man is still grasping my hand and he moves it further up my thigh. I'm completely stiff at this point, knowing that if I let my legs relax even the slightest, things would escalate. But they did anyway. He guided my hand up and with one of his fingers he touched me. I don't need to say where because you already know. I stare out the window and I'm begging for the car to stop, and luckily it does. I jump out of the car and my boyfriend and the stepsister are looking at me. "He touched me," I said. My boyfriend races over to the driver's side window, shouting and screaming at him, but the man speeds off very fast, and as he does, he kicks his license plate and we see it dent. We go back into the hotel and needless to say, I drink more. The next morning we were going on a boat trip and my boyfriend's family is asking if I'm alright after hearing about what happened. I say yes because it's true. It's over now, it could have gone a lot worse, and I hope I'll never see him again. We leave the hotel lobby and that's when I see them. Taxis. White, yellow. Taxi signs on top of them. Pulled into the taxi ranks. I head over to one. "Excuse me," I say to a taxi man. "Are all the taxis white here?" "Yes," he says. "Only taxi colors are white with the sign on top." I feel my insides churning. So let me reiterate this. A 50-year-old man, thought I, a 17-year-old, was alone and pretended to be a taxi service to get me in his car. Creepy taxi predator, please let's not meet again. I was 19, staying late at the college darkroom to develop some film for my photography class. The photography building, once a tobacco warehouse, was a dark, rickety hulk near some lonely railroad tracks and a little traveled part of campus. I finished developing my film close to midnight and headed out, nervous as always to be alone at night in this deserted part of town. It was very dark. Several of the street lights around the parking lot were out and the few that remained were phoning in and out. Very weakened, putting out a weak, flickery light that did nothing to reassure me as I headed toward my car. I heard him before I saw him. A scrape of feet on the asphalt. He said, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" I startled and dropped my keys, and he mumbled an apology for scaring me. I noticed he was wearing a jogging suit and limping. "What do you need?" I said. He hobbled a step or two toward me. "I think I sprained my ankle. Could you take me to the ER?" The university hospital was a short distance down the road. I hesitated. The guy looked perfectly pleasant, and he did seem to be in pain. But I'd recently finished a book about a serial killer, Ted Bundy, who lured some of his victims by pretending to have a broken arm and asking for their help carrying books to his car. When they leaned over to put his stuff in the passenger seat of his Volkswagen Bug, he knocked them unconscious with a crowbar and stuffed them inside. This scene played across my mind as I looked at the guy. It also occurred to me to wonder why the heck anybody would want to jog in this creepy part of town. "I'm sorry, I can't do that, but I can call someone for you. And there's a phone in the photography building there." "There's nobody to call. I just moved here. I don't really know anyone. Can't you just drive me? It's right down Limestone Avenue." He leaned against a car and winced as he reached down to rub at his ankle. "I'll call you an ambulance," I offered. "No, I can't afford that and I don't have health insurance. Can you please just drive me? I'll pay you $20. There was something in the way that he said this last bit. Something wrong. Like that exercise in my acting class, where we had to recite "Mary Had a Little Lamb," as though we were delivering a tragic monologue or a furious rant. There was a tone rising up that didn't quite match the words he was saying, a raw urgency that reached down inside me and hit the panic button hard. There was a moment of silence between us. "I can't help you," I said. "I'm leaving." I gripped my keys, slipping them between my fingers the way that my mom had taught me so I could use them as a weapon if he came at me. I kept my eyes on him as I speed walked the last few feet to my car. He watched me drive away, still leaning against that car, a flat expression on his face. Away from the dark parking lot, driving through campus with my music turned up, the fear faded. I started to feel a little bit guilty for leaving the guy there, although I knew I'd done what my mom and dad would have wanted me to do. I was about to turn into my dorm parking lot when I realized I needed to pick some stuff up for breakfast the next morning. So I turned around and headed back in the same direction I'd come. About a minute down the road, my stomach clenched. There was the guy in the jogging suit, running along the sidewalk. His ankle was perfectly fine. Later that summer, 2 students at my college were attacked by those same railroad tracks. The girl survived and her boyfriend died. The man who had attacked them was a serial killer dubbed the Railroad Killer by police. He murdered dozens of people across several states, most of them near railroad tracks. I didn't see his mugshot on TV until years later, but the picture broke me out in the same icy sweat I felt when I saw that guy running down the street. I can't be 100% positive, but my gut tells me I escaped a serial killer that night. In 2010, I was living in Quincy, Massachusetts with my husband, new baby, and a roommate. It was a Saturday, so I was taking a much-needed break from the baby and went to run errands and have some alone time. My first stop was to the local Radio Shack to get a phone accessory. After my purchase, I walked out of Radio Shack deep in thought about my to-do list when a voice broke through my reverie. "Excuse me, miss, can you help me please?" I blinked in confusion and looked over at the man who addressed me. My first impression was Italian grandpa. Everything about him was beige, from his khaki slacks, brown cardigan, and tweed flat cap to his sandy-colored mustache. Even the car he stood next to, a boat-sized town car, was a faded champagne. I hesitated. As a big believer in the golden rule, I generally try to help people out whenever I can, but this time something about the situation gave me pause. I stood there in the middle of the parking lot. "What do you need?" I asked. He smiled warmly. Well, you see, there's something wrong with my car. He held up a key fob. When I click my car key, my car door locks won't lock. It's very strange. Can you come over and take a look? He gestured to his car and clicked the fob in demonstration. Still hesitating, I answered, I don't know anything about cars, but we are here right at the Radio Shack. Maybe they can help you. No, he said. I think we can figure this out together, so please come here and look. Again, I repeated that I don't think I could help him. I could see that he was getting agitated, yet he continued to smile. He walked over to the back of his car and opened the trunk. But here's the strangest thing, he said. The doors won't lock, but the trunk will. He started waving at me eagerly. Come here and look at the trunk. I began to feel very confused. Part of me wanted to go over to help, yet greater instincts prevailed. I began to walk in the opposite direction to my car, repeating over and over again to the man, I can't help you. Go into Radio Shack for help. As I walked away, I saw him throw his arms in disgust, slam down the trunk, get in his car and drive away. I drove to my next errand, feeling very unsettled, but as I tried to process the encounter, I began to have doubts about my reaction. Maybe he was just an old man who needed help. Did I do the right thing? When I returned home, I shared my encounter with my husband and roommate. I expected that they would laugh and assure me I was being overly paranoid. Instead, they looked at me with wide eyes. Hey, my husband said, that guy was trying to kidnap you. I didn't report this incident to the police, as I didn't have any useful information regarding a license plate number, and I didn't think a man asking for help with his car counted as harassment. I did always wonder what the man's true intentions were. I decided to Google attempted kidnappings in Quincy, in hope that my search would turn up empty and this was truly an innocent if awkward encounter. Imagine my dismay when this article pulled up. Quincy man accused of attempting to kidnap woman, 20. I immediately recognized the perpetrator as the man from the Radio Shack parking lot. A follow-up article revealed that he actually lived in my old neighborhood. I often wonder if I was one of his first attempts at kidnapping and what would have happened to me if I had gone over to look in his trunk. So this happened a few months ago. My best friends P and I had just gotten out of school. We decided to get ice cream after school, and before we know it, it's 6 p.m. We leave the ice cream shop, which happens to be next to the liquor store. Small city. We noticed this shady guy standing outside the store, and we try to brush it off, but there's just something not right about him. A woman leaves the liquor store, and she's dressed nicely in a dress and heels. She starts walking, and before we know it, the guy starts following her. My friend and I get concerned, so we decide to tail him a little bit to make sure he doesn't have any bad intentions. Things escalate when we realize that he's filming this woman and she has no idea. It's disgusting. He's following her and has his phone out, trying to get a better video of what's under her skirt. P and I look at each other and have a mutual understanding. We knew that we had to do something, so we take a deep breath and somehow manage to put ourselves between the woman and the man. We hear him curse, but we don't dare turn around. We're both spread apart, making sure there is no way he can get her on film. Mind you, we are both 5'1", 17-year-old girls. Our hearts are racing, but we don't move away until the woman safely enters a restaurant, which is about 2 blocks away. She's in the restaurant, but this guy does not want to give up. He's waiting outside for her. He's lingering and even tries to peer inside through a window. P and I know we have to tell the woman what's going on just in case he tries something, so we step inside this fancy restaurant and spot the woman on a date with her boyfriend. I tap her on the shoulder and I fill her in. She's shocked that he followed her for 2 blocks and that she had no idea. I let her know that he's waiting outside and give her his description, just in case he follows her anywhere else. She thanks us profusely and even gives us a hug. P and I leave the restaurant feeling relieved because we both know we cannot live with ourselves if something were to happen to her. I was around 5 or 6 when this happened, and although some things are a little hard to recall, please forgive me as I attempt to translate the memories of my child self, along with what my mother and sister have told me, as the terror instilled in me from this ordeal still remains. Maybe this will prove to be therapeutic. This happened in 1990 or 1991. My mom suffers from bipolar disorder and did not like to take her medication because she felt cloudy and numb on it. She is originally from Thailand and she always told me, "It's America that makes me crazy." She'd often self-medicate with booze and cigarettes. She even kept a mason jar under the sink of something red that she made herself. No idea what was in it, but it smelled awful, and she called it Mom's Kool-Aid. She told me I was not to touch it or taste it, and definitely not tell my dad, and since I was the world's pickiest eater, who hardly ever saw my busy father anyway, that was never a problem. My dad was in the military, and he would often have to go out of the country, so my older sister and I were left at home with our mother, who was for the most part perfectly capable of caring for us, but she had her bad days, as all parents must. Complete with the off-the-chart mood swings that fluctuated between lying on the couch all day and wanting to play hide-and-seek with us and chasing anyone she found with a large kitchen knife. Typical childhood. Sometimes she would go to Tampa for a few days to gamble or party with friends that she had made. Most of them were also from Thailand or the Philippines. They all seemed outgoing and loud, like my mom. I watched a lot of TV when I was little and just assumed that's how real life was or should be. And nobody on TV acted like my mom, so I just thought she was a huge weirdo. I was always embarrassed at how people reacted to her because that's how my dad and sister acted, and being so young, I didn't have much compassion or understanding. I wanted her to be like a TV mom, and it didn't help that my dad was always berating her for acting crazy and that she had to be careful while he was gone and straighten up, or the state's going to take our kids away. My dad looked down at her, and after a while, I followed his example. I can't believe I did that. I am totally ashamed of myself, but I can only blame my youth and ignorance. One day, I remember she was in a super good but super distracted mood. She was curling her hair, putting on lipstick and jewelry, and her perfume was in the air. Offhandedly, and she informed us that she was going to Tampa. I was a little bit confused because my dad was still gone and wouldn't be back for another week, and we had school in the morning. She never left us when those things were going on, and I never had to get ready for school without my mom. Never. She even took me there on her bicycle because I could still fit in the toddler seat on the back. When she saw my panicked face, she reassured me that she just wanted to go see a friend who was having a birthday party and that she would be back in the morning to take me to school. My sister was 8 years older than me, so she was, for the most part, competent enough to look after me, but I wasn't looking forward to being left with her because she bullied me. I suspect it was due to my mom always favoring the baby, me at the time, and since I was super duper small for my age, that's how everybody treated me. I should mention that although she was a huge bully to me, my sister also had this tremendous and oftentimes irrational fear that since I was so small, I could easily be kidnapped, and she would always drill me with questions on the daily about how to deal with strangers and what to do if anyone ever tried to take me with them. She would even have mock drills where she would pretend to be a stranger by wearing this awful latex mask that I hated and making me run while timing me with her stopwatch and making me do it all over if I was too slow, or tricking me and popping out of nowhere saying stuff like, "Congratulations, you just got kidnapped." It was ridiculous, and I hated feeling like I always had to watch my back. I learned later on in my life that she did this because she and my mom had to thwart two would-be kidnappers on 2 separate occasions. Anyways, my mom drove away to Tampa, and my sister watched TV while I played with my pound puppies. After positioning them all around my pillow, I settled into bed and fell asleep. I awoke suddenly because I was being shaken roughly awake by my sister, who was hissing my name through gritted teeth. I was so confused. What time was it? Had it only been a few minutes or hours since I'd come up to bed? My mom always woke me up for school, but I had a clock radio by my bed that read 6 something, and although my window shades were down, I could see traces of soft blue pre-dawn. My sister pulled me out of bed and whispered furiously for me to get dressed. I was completely dismayed. Where was Mom? Why was my sister whispering? And why was she so mad? I would soon learn that she wasn't mad, she was terrified. She got down on her knees so that her face was about an inch away from mine and looked right into my eyes and whispered as calmly as she could. "There is a man sleeping on the couch. I'm going to take you downstairs and I want you to run through the backyard and go to Kathy's, a neighbor, and have her take you to school." Great. After a whole night of not being timed or having to run and hide in less than 15 seconds, she was at it again. I was a big fan of rolling my eyes at this age, so that's what I did. My sister gaped at me. I informed her loudly that I didn't believe her and I asked where Mom was. She covered my mouth and whispered that Mom wasn't home. Then she walked me over to the staircase, picked me up, and we slowly descended the stairs. I realized she was not trying to make the stairs creak, and I craned my neck around to see into the living room, and to my satisfaction, there wasn't anyone on the couch. I looked at her triumphantly like, "Yeah, right, who's on the couch?" But she shook her head and pointed down where the family room was by the garage and half bath, which was on a lower level of the first story. Not a basement, just like down a hallway of 4 steps. After opening the door to this hallway, she put me down at the foot of the steps and motioned for me to go forward. We had thick curtains drawn in this room, and they were in orange, white, and brown floral print, so their outlines practically glowed as the sun came up behind them, and as my eyes adjusted, I made out a figure on our smaller couch who was turned away from us, facing the couch back. At first glance, I thought it was my mom because of the long dark hair and tan skin, but the hair on the back of my neck prickled as I realized this person was all balled up and seemed crammed into the couch, meaning they were a lot taller than my mom. Their shoulders were broader and they were wearing dirty sneakers and paint-stained jeans that were loose, like a man's, because it was a man. I started shaking all over. This had never happened before, and my parents weren't here, and I had no idea what to do. My sister put her hand back over my mouth and ran me back up the stairs. She closed the door quietly and pushed the lock button on it. She had locked him down there, which made me feel a little bit better. I put a lot of trust into locked doors. My sister took me to the kitchen and gave me my book bag, but not my lunchbox. And as I was about to inform her of this, she opened the backyard porch door and gave me this solemn look, so I shut up. She told me to run as fast as I could, not to stop until I got there, and not to tell anyone about the man because she was going to take care of it. She helped me put on my backpack, then counted to 3, just like in all the drills that she made me do, and I took off. I dodged my dogs, I unlatched the chain link gate, and I ran down the back walkway toward the driveway across the front yard and off our property. I wasn't allowed to cross the street, but here I was crossing it, flying across it even. I ran through other people's yards that were still wet with dew and didn't stop until I was knocking as hard as I could on Kathy's front door. Kathy opened the door in her bathrobe and her hair all messy, and I told her that she had to take me to school. That's all I said. She gave me a look like, "Oh, do I now?" before letting me in. I sat in her kitchen as she offered me breakfast food I wasn't going to eat and got her kids ready for daycare. I'm sure she asked me why she had to take me to school, but I can't really remember the conversation. I think I just told her that my mom wasn't home and she just left it at that. Everybody in the neighborhood knew about my mom, mostly because she was always out in the yard gardening and being super friendly, but they'd all had to take care of my sister and me at some point, just like my mom would take care of their kids when they went out to run errands. This was the only time in my life I felt like neighbors were just automatic friends. I went to school and didn't have lunch, so the receptionist gave me a quarter to buy a PB&J and milk, which I didn't eat or drink but knew I had to take to school, so it wouldn't look like they weren't taking care of me. Once I was talking with my friends, all recollection of the events of that morning faded from my mind. It wasn't until after school that I remembered everything because I didn't see my mom's van waiting for me. I didn't see her on her bike or waving an umbrella at me. I didn't see Kathy or my sister, or anybody that was there for me. I stood there looking and thinking I could probably walk home, but I was terrified of having to do that, simply because I never had, but more because I was always told I wasn't supposed to. There was a boy in my class with white blonde hair who lived in my neighborhood and he was staring at me. I felt uncomfortable and turned away, trying to look like I belonged there and that everything was alright, but caught the attention of his father who had been helping his younger kids onto their bicycles. "Honey, where's your mommy?" he asked me. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to confess that I didn't know. I didn't want them to know all about the weird stuff that was happening because what if they told other people or my teacher or even the police? I didn't want my mom to get in trouble, and I didn't want to get in trouble either. "Do you want to walk with us? She lives close, right?" he asked his son, who nodded. He made his son walk his bike and keep pace with me while he watched his younger kids. I think this kid asked me where my mom was, but I don't know what I told him or if I told him anything even, because I knew his dad was listening. I think I said that my sister was supposed to come get me, so the issue would be minimized to an irresponsible older sibling and not an all-out parental abandonment. I think children that are raised around the threat of impending instability are quick on their feet with responses like that, or just play dumb. Once we got to my house, I ran up the driveway as the father watched, waiting to have responsibility relinquished, but I noticed with a sinking stomach that their garage was down, which meant my mom's van was not in it, which also meant my mom was not there. I froze, fearing discovery, wondering if I could just wave goodbye and go to the backyard and sit in my playhouse. But almost as if by magic, I saw my sister turn in the driveway on her bike. The dad gave her a major disapproving side-eye. They talked a bit, and then he smiled at me, and they all waved goodbye. She ran up to me and grabbed my hand, so I followed her up the walkway towards the stairs of our front porch, and we went into her house. I asked her if the man was still there, and she said no. She told me after she saw that I made it to the neighbors, she went back down to the family room with the biggest knife she could find. She kicked the cushions to wake the guy up and yelled, "Who the heck are you and what are you doing in my house?" And he, seeing her towering above him with this knife and being super disoriented, probably hungover, screamed in bloody terror and cowered behind some pillows. "I'm a friend of your mom's," he told her. "She told me to look after you. I folded the clothes. My sister then pointed the knife at him and told him to get up slowly. She waved it at his face and told him to get out now, which he was only too happy to do. He managed to unlock and pull open the sliding door in the family room, which we never used because it was too hard for anyone but my father to shut all the way. And she said the dogs jumped on him, trying to be friendly. Spaniels love everyone, the dummies, but he just thought they were going to attack him, so he picked up the pace as he climbed over the chain link fence and disappeared. After locking everything up, so she thought, my sister said the phone rang and it was our mom. She said mom sounded drunk and asked her if we'd met her friend, and my sister flipped out on her. Our mom couldn't understand why she was so upset and explained that she was driving a few friends home when they met a real-life Seminole walking down the road. So they pulled over and harassed him long enough to find out that he didn't have a place to stay that night. So, being in a super good mood, and since she loves making new friends, my mom told him he could stay at her house, but he had to fold some laundry and watch her kids so she could stay out and keep partying. He agreed. She let him in through the garage, told him where to find the basket of laundry, which I do recall seeing, neatly folded by the couch in the family room, and told him there are some beers in the fridge, but not to go up to the second story. My sister said it was like, well, I told him not to go upstairs, like that ensured our safety or something. I wish I could end this story on a happy note because that right there seems like a great place to end it. It's kind of light and funny even, but sadly no. That weekend my sister asked to sleep over at a friend's and my mom let her. She always lets us do stuff like that and she was being extra nice to us, I guess because of what happened earlier that week. She even told me I could have someone sleep over, so I called all of my friends from best to worst around 8 to 9 p.m. and invited them to come sleep over. No notice at all, it's just how I rolled. And though I expected they would all jump at the chance, sadly one by one their parents all said no. I kept trying to come up with more girls in my class that I could call until my mom told me it was too late and past my bedtime, so I made my way up the stairs full of the pals. She asked if I wanted to sleep in her room and have a sleepover with her, but I just wanted to know, as mean as I could, and got ready for bed. All the energy I was putting into being a huge brat must have been exhausting because I fell asleep immediately. I awoke with a start because my dogs were barking in the backyard. I remember I opened my eyes and instantly felt strange. It was pitch black. That shouldn't be. My closet light was always on. Always. Sometimes my dad would turn it off before he left for work early in the morning, but I always woke up and turned it back on, even if the sun was almost up and I could see around to my room. When I was in bed, the closet light was on. Period. Besides, it was not early in the morning this time, and my dad wasn't home. I got super mad. Who turned out my light? I stared into the black until my eyes adjusted enough that I saw the darker black rectangle of my open bedroom door. I always left my door wide open, but in the dark it looked like it was opening into a void, and anything or nothing was just through it. My anger faded and I started to shake. I decided to leave the safety of my covers, walk over to my closet and flip the switch back on. That would set everything right. I made my way over to the closet, felt around on the wall until I felt the switch and flipped it. Nothing flipped. I flipped it off and then on again. Repeat. Nothing. It was still dark. I noticed my clock radio wasn't on either, and the lamppost by our mailbox wasn't emitting any light through my window shade either. My hopes sank as I came to the realization that the electricity was out. It wasn't storming, so it must be the breaker box. I knew it was outside because sometimes I'd run a bath and the water would stay cold, so my dad would go out to the backyard to wherever the thing was and flip it for me. I instantly regretted not sleeping in my mom's room and was deciding whether or not to be brave and feel my way down the hall to it. But I never had a chance to do this because suddenly I heard thumping, like somebody was trudging around downstairs. If it were Christmas Eve, I would have been stoked, but it wasn't, and I knew this wasn't Santa. Maybe it was my mom trying to turn the electricity back on, but that seemed very unlikely somehow. I backed away from my closet toward the foot of my bed where I kept all of my big stuffed animals propped against it, and sat on top of them until my weight shifted them back and I sank into them. It felt safer having them all around me and only my head peeped through. I reached over my bed and pulled the covers down so they hung over the edge, covering my head so I could just peek through. If you walked into my room, my bed would be in the far right corner and the closet would be directly across from it on the same wall as the door. The door swung open to the right, so where I was, I couldn't see down the hallway anymore, but I could see through a crack of black by the hinges. I heard the trudging get louder until it was coming up the stairs. Once you got to the top, you could either go left to the bathroom in my parents' room or right toward my sister's room or my room. I wondered where this person would go, and I noticed there was a movement through the hinge crack coming toward my room, so I held my breath and closed my eyes tight. Whoever it was came in slowly, as if they weren't sure about their surroundings. I heard them stop and then move over to my bed. I smelled something like mommy's Kool-Aid, and I heard them grab my pillow and then toss it toward the closet. I know because it hit me in the head and then tumbled to the floor. The pound puppies must have gone flying because I heard the soft pit-pat of them landing around me, and after a pause that seemed to last forever, but was probably like 15 seconds, whoever walked out went into my sister's room, shutting her door behind them. My first reaction was to run to my mom's room, but I was scared this person would soon discover the room was empty and come out quickly, so I got up and looked down the hallway. I heard something faintly down at the end, so I ducked down by my rocking chair. From this vantage point, I was able to see directly down the hallway, but I couldn't really see anything down it at all. It was just a big black space. I always threw all of my clothes on this rocking chair, so I got down low under where they draped and stared in front of me. I remember feeling the strain of my eyes dilating, not knowing that's what they were doing as I watched the black rectangle of my doorway change ever so slightly. There was something darker, something moving towards me. It was close to the ground. It sounded like a scurrying animal crawling on all fours, but I knew it was deceptively small in its posture, and all I could do was stare in horror as it came closer and closer. This thing that was darker than the dark. I watched as it crawled over to my bed and heard it as it felt all over the sheets and covers. My teeth started chattering as I realized it was searching for me. It started feeling around on the floor, under the bed, touching my stuffed animals, and as it got closer to me, I let out a small gasp. It stopped and turned toward me. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my face and another on my shoulder, and somebody was pulling me out from under the drapes and pulling me fast against them, holding me. They were shaking too, and I realized it was my mom. She knew her way around this house in the dark, and suddenly we were gliding down the stairs and out the front door into the cool night air, running across the yard in our PJs to our next door neighbors, who let us in and called the cops. My mom wouldn't let me go outside with her while she talked to the police, but told me later the guy, or her friend, who my sister had kicked out, had returned because he was furious at her for being unforgivably rude, and my mom, who he felt had cheated him out of their deal. He knew our dad wasn't home, and since our breaker box was located outside, he managed to turn off our power and come back in through the sliding door that my sister hadn't managed to lock, thinking he would scare us and make my mom apologize or something. That's what my mom told us that the police had told her. She said that when they pulled him out and handcuffed him, he kept repeating, "But I folded the clothes." She still to this day tries to make it into a joke by imitating him while my sis and I cringe. Although lately I find myself wanting to laugh with her. Maybe someday I will. I'm thankful that nobody was hurt and that my dad installed the security system and got a breaker box locked, but unfortunately afterwards, he hospitalized my mom and told her she had to take her medication every day or he'd leave her in there. She agreed, but they ended up divorced 5 years later, and it took me my entire childhood before I could understand and forgive them. I'm still working on learning how to forgive myself, but I imagine a lot of people are in the same boat as me. Looking back on that time now, I'm just so relieved my sister wasn't home because who knows what the heck that guy had planned. This is my first post in the community, so sorry if it's not perfect. This happened about an hour ago, so sorry for any errors or anything. I was riding the subway back to my dorm in North Philly after dropping my boyfriend off at the train station. Being extra cautious on the subway, I sat in the seat closest to the window. A man came and sat next to me, and I glanced over to look at him. As I did this, I noticed a man sitting across from me, staring openly at me while playing with a rope in his hands. This wasn't a small piece of rope. It was a thick boating line. I thought this was odd, so I decided to look away. I glanced back periodically, and every time I did, he was still staring, licking his lips, and tying knots in the rope. At this point, I'm freaked out, so I stare out of the window. As I do this, I catch his reflection. He's openly ogling me, licking his lips and still tying knots. I get off at my stop from my transfer north and didn't notice him get off. I walk down to the platform for the northbound train and sat on a bench next to a kind-looking lady. There was only about a foot or so between us, definitely not enough room for somebody else to sit down. As I glanced down to check the time, the same man from the train came and sat directly next to me between the lady and me. At this point I'm freaked, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I scooted over to the edge of the bench and kept my head down. He moved as close to me as he could, mind you, still tying knots in his rope and not looking away from me. At this point, I knew something was going on, but he was a very large man, so I decided to just get up and stand on the platform. He got up directly after me and stood half a step behind my back. I could feel his breath on my neck. I'm in a full-blown panic. There were people waiting on the platform, but nobody was noticing what was happening. I decided the best thing I could do was walk up the steps and wait for the train next to the ticket booth. He didn't follow me, so I was relieved. When the train came, I walked down the steps and sat between two ladies. He sat directly across from me. He still had the rope in his hands, tying knots. The end of the rope was in his hands, while the rest was stuffed in his pocket. The train leaves the station, and he's back staring at me openly. He looked hungry, and not in the way that he wanted a meal. I have no words to describe the look in his eyes other than terrifying. I've never seen a look like that before. I tried to call my mom as a comfort while I waited for my stop to come, but she didn't pick up. I kept my head down, occasionally glancing up to see him just unchanged, just tying and untying the rope. At this point, I'm thinking about escape plans. I knew I shouldn't get off at my stop, so he wouldn't know where I live. When I get to the stop before mine in a busy area, I wait until the very last second to get off the train. The doors won't stop even if you try to get them to open. Right when I hear them start to close, I jump up and sprint towards the doors. I get off right as they close. I looked back and saw him trying to run off as well. I could see him pressed against the doors, looking me in the eyes. I have never been more scared in my life. He was significantly bigger than me. I'm 5'5" and maybe 160, and the look in his eyes was unmistakably predatory. I got up on the street and I asked another girl walking if she could walk with me to my dorm because I was that scared. I keep thinking about the what ifs. What if I had just gotten off with everyone else? Would he have followed me? Why did he have the rope? Was he going to try and kill me? I'm just glad I got off in time because I know with certainty that he wanted to hurt me. I have never seen that look in someone's eyes before and I never want to see it again. If I hadn't been careful, I know he would have tried to hurt me, or worse. I just worry that he might do this again. Hello, my name is Peter. I will share my stalker/creeper story from about 8 years ago with you. I was 18 or 19 years old at the time this happened. I'm 6 feet tall and back then did several different sports like tennis, swimming, and I even practiced karate for 4 years. Meaning I was in excellent physical condition, which gave me the confidence or illusion of being able to protect myself and others from harm if necessary. I'm telling you this because as it turned out, nope, double, triple, super nope with an extra nope on top. Even a big young man can easily fall victim to an insane person while deluding himself that he will always be fine in any encounter. Which shook my world back then and makes me mistrust a lot of people for the most minor reasons up until today. Let's start with how and where I met my personal psycho. During the last 3 years of school, we had a lot of small breaks in between classes, many of which my friends and I spent in a coffee shop close by. It was one of those super tiny corner businesses that only got like 7 seats around a 13-foot bar and 2 tiny tables for 3, and that's it. Because it was such a small shop and not some random big city Starbucks, you got to know anyone else who frequented this establishment by name in no time, including the service staff, of course. The bar was kind of chic while still being cozy. There was obviously expensive wooden furniture and huge background mirrors from top to bottom behind the bar, which were dimly lit and decorated, providing a cool, expensive, but also laid-back flair somehow. It was just a stone's throw away from the courthouse and maybe 300 yards from the university. Due to its location and ambience, most upscale customer like lawyers and employees from the courthouse came in during the early morning and lunch break, and students visited in the mid-morning and evening. At night, the bar changed from a coffee shop to a chilly music, dimmed light kind of hipster's paradise, where young people would go to get a little boozy with friends. A great place to talk, relax, and connect. Overall, a location where you usually don't expect to meet somebody like Michael. Michael was a regular customer in the late evening and at night. So even though my friends and I had been at the bar all the time for over a year already, I had never seen him until I turned 17 and started going out at night more frequently. He was about my height, very pale, and I assumed to be around 24 to 26 at the time. He had one of those everyday faces that you see on the street and easily forget before you ever turn the corner. Medium-length brown hair, round facial features, always exuding an expression that always comes across as maybe a bit gloomy and depressive, but in no way a just run away while you can. Scar face with murder eyes. A regular, unimpressive kind of guy, if you will. He was also quite obese and always came to the bar alone, drinking a couple of beers and just sitting there doing nothing but staring at people through the mirrors behind the counter all night. You know, just one of those weird lonely guys that you either ignore or, if you are stupid as me, feel just a tad sorry about. Try to be nice by talking to them about stuff, like your hobbies, your life. Man, it makes me angry just thinking about it. Anyways, back to the story. About when I turned 17, I started a habit of sometimes buying a book or magazine, hopping onto a bus to drive to this bar at around 6 or 7 p.m., just to read in the chilly atmosphere of this place, with the great music and the dimmed melancholic lights. It was my escape from being stuck at home with my frustratingly annoying mom and my always stressed out dad. I started to spend a lot and probably too many evenings at this bar, usually just sitting there reading and enjoying the peace this place provided me. The students and staff there knew and liked me, and I would often just chat about this and that over the counter with them. Because the bar had this kind of gallant yet fresh vibe to it, the customers were generally quite beautiful young people, hip students getting a little bit drunk and noisy before going to a party or wherever the night takes them. I didn't 100% fit in because I was so young and average looking, but I was always well dressed and looked normal. I was never drunk, so I was generally accepted as the quiet reading dude at table 2. Just a young friendly face in a crowd of young friendly faces. But Michael didn't fit in at all. He always looked somewhat sad and sorrowful. His clothes were usually depressingly gray and monotonous. You could see that he didn't give a crap about what he was wearing or whether or not he had been shaving for a couple of days. Or maybe he didn't even realize that his semblance instantly came across as a little creepy or repelling, considering the fancy and joyful surroundings at this bar. On top of that, he was seriously just sitting there with a hard, somewhat cold and distant look on his face. Between all of those laughing, blabbering people all night long, sipping on his second, third, and fourth beer. Not talking, not reading, just staring at the people through the mirrors behind the bottle shelves. Maybe he was a little bit jealous, or even a bit angry, when he was watching all those people. Happy-go-lucky girls and their cruel grinning boyfriends while he got more and more drunk every night in complete silence. Just staring at how lively and bright, sparkly and fancy everything and everybody at this bar was except for him. And me. Yes, me. Michael the Maniac and I were basically quite alike, which shocked me when I realized it years later. Maybe that's why he was so fixated on me in retrospect. We were both frequent customers. We always came in during the late evening, and while I wasn't received as weird or out of place necessarily at this bar, due to my open, friendly appearance or habit of reading, / obviously not craving attention like he was, I was still also an outsider at this place. Never really one of them, and thinking just like him. Rather alone in this bar full of party people than at home. I always loved being surrounded by and becoming a little part of this place's coolness. Watching and sometimes talking to all those flamboyant night owls in the beautiful bar provided me with peace and joy. Both of which Michael was obviously seeking there as well, but couldn't obtain because none ever wanted to have anything to do with such a freaking creepy weirdo. There is a difference between being alone and choosing to be alone though, and that's why I'm certain that Michael actually hated the bar and the people there, including me, with all of his heart. And you could see it on his face. Maybe not so much the hatred that had been building up over all those years of being ignored, but the sadness and burning wish of people being noticed by anyone in this hipster music playing cool kids bar. That's why I felt sorry for him. That's why I wanted to be nice. And that's why he apparently demanded on my ongoing attention after I made swift contact with him. There came an evening when Michael and I were alone at the bar after some other customers had left. The sudden acoustic drop from drunk chicks giggling hysterically to I turn a book page every 2 minutes while we both sip our beer in dead silence was unbearable. Since he was such a weirdo, I just tried to read my book and pretended like I was really alone, but of course, I felt like a freaking jerk within seconds, knowing that he was staring at me through those damn mirrors, and I hoped for anyone to enter the bar, but of course, none did. And after what appeared to be ages of Bob Dylan-ish music trying to overshadow an otherwise grave-like calm in this usually so vivid bar, only sometimes disrupted by a rattling sound from the dishwasher and me flipping a page, I couldn't take it anymore and started small talk. Unsurprisingly, he wasn't very talkative. Being a socially awkward weirdo getting drunk at a posh bar and all. Pretty much all he did was stare at me, you know. Not even any more creepily than he usually did all night long anyways, but in the way somebody looks you dead in the eyes for minutes without saying a single word or even twitching a muscle, other than nodding their head every now and then to confirm that they are not actually brain dead, that you're not prattling to a lifeless puppet. Therefore, I didn't get to know a lot about him, but I sure told him a heck a lot of stuff about me. My sports, school stuff, plans for after school, you know, whatever you can desperately think of in one-sided small talk. Since this conversation was more of a monologue and bored me, of course I was still begging for somebody I knew to enter the bar, but there was still not a single merciful soul busting in to rescue from this dark, pouring pit of social awkwardness and constant headbanging. So after being stared at and nodded at while reciting my teenage life for probably well over 30 minutes, I finished my drink and went home a lot earlier than planned. I just couldn't take this creep anymore. In this bar, in the silence. Since this time was really unusual for me to leave, it wasn't even 8:30 p.m. yet, Michael pretty much knew perfectly well that I was just trying to escape from this whole situation by saying something about early school, but I didn't care. All I thought was, just gotta get the heck out of here. When I came to the bar the following morning with my friends, Suzanne, the bartender who had been serving us the night of my conversation with Michael, took me to the side and warned me to not socialize with them. She told me that Michael had only been a regular ever since he got kicked out and banned from some other pub and the 2 gay bars in town. He apparently didn't understand what the word no means and became aggressive and one time even physically violent towards customers. That he isn't choosing to drink 3 to 4 beers when he is here, but that the staff is not allowed to sell him more. That she wanted to ban him from the bar long ago, but since he is technically always just sitting there doing nothing, she didn't have the courage to bring it up. That he is giving her the creeps every time she has to serve at night and that I should stay away from him. Awesome. And from now on, every single time I went to the bar, Michael was exclusively staring at me. Not too obviously, of course. He quickly turned away whenever I looked up into the mirrors. But you could tell. You could tell that he wanted me to go over there to a seat at the end of the bar and talk to him again. Which I did not. But that resulted in this obvious awkward tension in the air. The distinctive tension you only experience between someone desperately wanting to be noticed and the other person strictly ignoring them. Weeks passed by. I barely ever visited the bar alone anymore, and when I did, and Michael was there, I left immediately as soon as there were too few people. He creeped me out a lot already at that point, and then one night in late November it happened. It was around 9:45 p.m. Michael was there and maybe 5 other customers, including me. I ordered a drink and went to the bathroom. When I came back, only Michael and I were left. The other customers were all gone, and Jonas, the bartender, just put down a full glass of beer onto my table. Shit. Crap. Hammered through my head while I was already contemplating whether I should chug that glass, which is impossible because I will instantly throw up if I drink alcohol too quickly. I'm a bit of a wuss in that regard, or just say some random excuse, pay and get out. Just as I wanted to finish that thought, Michael, who had been sitting there like a statue staring at people through the mirrors as usual all night long, had suddenly turned to me and completely out of nowhere said, "Well, can we talk now, or do you have early school again tomorrow?" I was baffled for a second. Of course, I mean, what? Apart from the bar-wide hello and maybe a half-hearted head nod, I hadn't communicated with him in weeks. I'd honestly forgotten about the early school excuse I used back then, but this weirdo, who now looked at me openly furious and upset, apparently still had it memorized all the way through. No. What? No. I am just, But he was already enraged. His face had turned red like a tomato within seconds. He said very silently, but with a lurking, dangerous undertone, "Do you think I'm stupid?" And he smashed his fist on the counter, making all the empty glasses rattle loudly. I was still shell-shocked and couldn't answer. All I did was what he always does to others, just stare at them like a creepy moron. "Michael, I'm sorry, but I think you should leave now. I don't want any trouble, alright?" Came from behind the bar as Jonas had already begun to circle around the counter. "No trouble? Alright. Yeah, you know what? Screw you. I'm out anyways. What do I owe you?" Michael was still somehow becoming more and more red by the second. "Nothing. It's fine. Just go right now." "Fine. Bye, Jonas. Bye, Peter." And while I was still standing there like a mute idiot, he just took his jacket, looked at me once more, and left as if nothing had happened. After I could finally breathe again, I told Jonas about how I had been talking to Michael several weeks earlier, and he said that I should be more careful, that Michael is a psycho, basically the same story that Suzanne had told me too. I didn't feel like drinking my beverage anymore, but I still stayed for another half an hour just to calm down. Jonas promised me that this stuff will probably get Michael banned from the bar, and that I shouldn't worry about coming back again. Being a stupid teenager who is confident that nothing will happen, I'm a grown man and will be fine, I refused to call a cab. It was pitch black outside, but yeah, what the heck, am I right? I paid my bill, put on my jacket, and waddled off into the snow towards the bus stop, which was like 5 minutes away. I didn't get far, of course. Just as I turned the corner, I heard a sudden shh, and felt an instant agonizing pain all over my face. My eyes instinctively closed at once, and I couldn't open them anymore. I was blind. I felt panic and overwhelming fear, but before I could even yell a single time, I was already swept off my feet by a hard push and hit the ground, unable to open my eyes, feeling like somebody had poured steaming hot lava onto them, unable to defend myself. I heard Michael screaming above me while I was kicked in the chest and stomach. Hey dude, you think I'm stupid, right? And while my sightless eyes were on fire, I was fortunately able to cover my head with my arms, all the while hearing and even more so feeling a horrible cracking sound from a brutal kick to my chest that smashed all the air out of my body. Yeah, that's right. I'm stupid, right? I'm the stupid one here, he said. It was what felt like a never-ending barrage of insane pain. Brutal kicks to my face and stomach and yelling. I finally managed to shout out for help, but that was already not necessary anymore. 2 men had come running around the corner and were apparently wrestling down Michael already when I heard Jonas speeding towards me. Going. What the heck? Still lying there quivering, blind, and in excruciating pain, and with what I assumed was a chainsaw gnawing inside my chest, it didn't take long for cops and an ambulance to arrive. As I couldn't see anything, I don't know how exactly the 2 men, to whom I am still very grateful up to this day, managed to subdue Michael the maniac so quick, despite his pepper spray, but they must have dragged him away from me because I couldn't hear him yell and curse at me anymore. I had to go to the hospital with 2 broken ribs and of course all kinds of painful bruises and swollen eyes. They said I was still basically lucky that I could cover my head, and that this 200+ pound jerk didn't jump on me but merely restrained himself to kicking me while I was lying there. Michael was convicted of what I think is called assault and battery in English and sentenced to 8 months in jail, which was also because he had already had some violent crimes in his record. If I recall correctly, he only sat out 7 months though. I cannot exactly remember. Plus, he had to see some psychiatric counselor afterwards for some time. In the meanwhile, I'd already moved away and had never visited this coffee shop even once more, just to not take the risk of bumping into this lunatic ever again. This whole story has taught me 2 important life lessons. 1. Do not, and I repeat not, talk to the weirdo in the train/bar/wherever just because you can't take the silence. Rather bite your tongue off and run. And 2, weight your words more cautiously. Out of what I assumed was just a random chit-chat, small talk about unimportant stuff, some people might read an oncoming friendship or relationship of trust or whatever. So seriously, be more careful not only about who, but especially what you talk to people about. This isn't the creepiest thing I've ever experienced, but it is the most recent and I think it makes the best story. I don't post here often, so please go easy. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting in my car in a parking lot on the lake, waiting on a friend. They had a few cars in it and it was only about 5 p.m, so it was in no way dark or empty and I felt completely safe. I was just mindlessly scrolling through Reddit when I saw a truck pull up on my passenger side. I looked up for a second but didn't think much of it. It wasn't super close to me. Maybe a parking spot or 2 between us. Pretty much as soon as I looked back down to my phone, the truck peeled off so quickly it startled me, and I looked back up. It quickly did a U-turn in front of my car and sped up next to my driver's side, barely missing hitting me. Stopping so close to me, he was blocking my door and part of the front of my car with his truck, making it impossible for me to get out or drive away. There were 3 men in the car all smiling at me so big and creepily. The whole thing sent shivers down my spine. "What you doing, hun?" the driver asked in a flirty tone. I tried to hide how startled I was and responded as nonchalantly as I could. "Just waiting on my boyfriend. He'll be there any minute." His smile instantly dropped into a scowl and never returned. "Is he big?" His expression in combination with his words made it feel like a threat. I'm a petite young girl that waits tables and bartends. I have been in similar situations many times before. I know from experience the only way to handle these guys is confidently. They come on stronger when they can sense you're nervous. I laughed loudly and answered, "Judging by your truck, he's bigger than you where it matters. Do yourself a favor and leave before he gets here." I thought I had them. Why would you be interested in a girl that mocks your truck and your dick? I was wrong. How about I just get you out of here before he shows up and I can show you I'm not compensating for anything? He didn't say it flirtatiously. He was pissed. These guys were already creeping me out, but now I was terrified I was going to be kidnapped. The parking lot wasn't empty, but as I was waiting on someone to meet me, I parked as far away from the other cars as I could. It also dawned on me in this moment that most of those cars were probably empty, since most people would probably be out on the lake, as this is a boat launch. It didn't help that they looked huge. I'm 95 pounds or so, at 5 feet tall, and the boyfriend I was meeting was not much bigger. I continued trying to joke the whole thing away, but these men were not laughing. The driver was getting angrier and angrier the longer we spoke. I was getting annoyed making fewer jokes, telling them more straight up to leave me alone, but they just wouldn't leave. I'm not sure if it was out of fear or pure annoyance, but adrenaline kicked in hard. I just started screaming at them. "I'm gonna beat your ugly asses my damn self if you don't get out of my face in 10 seconds. As I dramatically threw off my seatbelt, pulled my seat away from the steering wheel, and pretended to start to climb out of my passenger seat, as they still had my driver's side door blocked. They hurried off yelling about how nobody's friendly anymore. Thankfully, they didn't hang around long enough to see my tiny self hop out of my car, or the size of my friend. To the men that blocked my car in, let's not meet again and get yourself some help, because you're terrible at talking to women." Okay, so I'm about to tell the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. The thing is, I'm not an English speaker, and even though I manage, I'm not sure about all the technical scuba diving vocabulary, but I'll do my best. But please be indulgent. It happened last year between Christmas and New Year's Eve. I'm from the French Caribbean, so it's not unusual to scuba dive during the Christmas holidays. My family and I, 25 female, booked a few dives. They were all really good scuba divers, a lot better than me. They passed a few scuba diving levels that allowed them to participate in way more technical dives that I'm allowed to do. I enjoy scuba diving as well, and I'm able to do almost every casual dive, but I also don't feel very safe diving without an instructor yet, even more so if it's a dive with decompression stops required. If anyone isn't familiar with scuba diving, here's a quick explanation. You can dive safely until a certain depth before the pressure becomes dangerous. If you dive below that point, which is roughly 20 meters or 65 feet, you have to do decompression stops during your ascent. It means that you have to stop while going back to the surface a certain time to let your body adapt itself to the pressure. If you ride up too quickly, you may catch decompression sickness, which can lead in the worst case scenario to death. So we decided that I could manage a little private lesson with an instructor first, prior to more exciting dives with my family. So the first day my family was enjoying a dive on a technical spot that I wasn't feeling up to while I was alone with my instructor, retrieving my old scuba diving reflexes. Everything went okay. We were on a beautiful coral reef, and there were many beginners on the boat, and I was by the far more experienced tier. So finally my instructor decided that he could manage me with another student who was truly a beginner. And after a small briefing with every safety rule and hand sign, which is the only way to communicate underwater, we began our descent. I quickly retrieved all of my old reflexes and was enjoying myself, going back and forth to the instructor and the beginner diver during at least 20 minutes. Everything was perfect besides one thing. It was a windy day and there was a heavy swell. It's less of a problem underwater than it is for a surface swimmer, but the only thing was that it requires more physical effort to swim, and so my air bottle was emptying a little bit quicker than usual, which is normal. I signaled to my instructor that I was running out of air and he nodded. It was at this level, far from being critical. It was at that moment that I saw a young man swimming towards me. It wasn't the instructor nor a student. I've never seen him before, but he was full in scuba diving gear, and we were the only dive boat on the spot, so I assumed he was with us. And I just didn't pay attention to him on the boat. He was swimming fast towards me and then signaled to me that he was out of air. When the air failure happens in scuba diving, there is a very strict procedure. You have to help the person, no questions asked, because Every second is vital. If you faint underwater, you drown. On your gear, you have 2 breathing devices, a regulator and an octopus. I'm not sure about the English word. A main device and a spare device, so I handed the guy my spare breathing device, which means that we were both breathing on my gear, consuming twice as much air as I was consuming alone. I waited till the guy seemed calmed down and tried to hand sign him to go see my instructor. He nodded a no and signed me to start our ascent. I understand this is the procedure. I was a little low on air and above the decompression stop level, so the right thing to do was to go up to the surface before having an air failure, but I've had to tell my instructor first. The guy was very reluctant, and it was strange because it would have taken us like 30 seconds to tell the instructor, and he would have started an ascent with us. During this time, I was panicking as I saw my own air level going down, and I saw that our instructor was staring at us quizzically and swimming towards us. It was at this moment that the guy let go of my spare air device and started swimming away, breathing again in his own breathing device. I was totally lost and started my ascent with my instructor. Once at the surface, because of the tides, I was feeling dizzy and nauseous, so my bizarre encounter wasn't the first thing that I debriefed. It was after I calmed down and the boat was driving us towards the beach, without the strange guy, that I asked my instructor about what happened. Oh, I don't know. Maybe a guy who lost his group and needed some time to calm down, I replied. Okay, but why did he tell me that he was out of air? My instructor told me that I probably misunderstood his hand sign, that he was probably not telling me he was having an air failure because he left breathing in his own device. I'm sure I saw him do the air failure sign, but okay. The next day, I joined my family during my dive, and the instructor was different. It was a girl this time named Charlie. I've had time to think about that guy, and I was worried about him, so I told everything that happened to Charlie and asked her if she knew the guy and if he was okay because I didn't see him going back to the surface. She asked me to describe him, which I did, and she told me. Oh, that's Marvin. Nah, don't worry about him. He's preparing himself to become a scuba diving instructor. Every time he has a day off from the restaurant he's working in, he asks us to drive him to the coral reef in the morning and to pick him up in the afternoon. I ate at this restaurant this afternoon and saw him. Don't worry. I was feeling relieved and told myself that it was just a comprehension issue with Marvin. The rest of the week went without any incident. I was doing more and more technical dives and everything went very smoothly. Charlie was a wonderful instructor. Never saw Marvin again, that being said, until the last dive. It was on New Year's Eve. We planned the best dive on that day. It was on a shipwreck and I felt trained enough to try it without any instructor, just my family and I. It was Charlie's day off. It was fairly deep for a beginner like me, 30 meters at its down point around 98 feet. On my first day, the male instructor was there and told us that he would be exploring the shipwreck too, so we would cross paths and that he would help me if he saw that I needed it. It was very comforting to know, and my family felt comforted too when I told them that. So we began our descent and started swimming around the shipwreck. We crossed our old instructor twice, but every time I signed him that everything was alright. It was at that moment that I saw Marvin swimming towards me. At that moment, I was about 5 to 10 meters above my down point, still staying under my decompression stop level though. I was a little surprised and even more surprised when he signed me again. He was out of air. I was mistrustful, but if there were any chance that it would be true, I could not help him. So I handed him my spare breather. This time I had much air left, so it wasn't a problem. He took him, started breathing in it, and took my arm. I reached to see the air level instruments, but he prevented me from seeing them. Then he signed me to start an ascent with him. I immediately signed no. I wasn't at my deepest when he reached me, but I've been deeper during this time, and I've had a decompression stop to do. I saw that my father saw us, but he quickly looked away, probably not understanding what was going on. I tapped at my diving computer, a device that calculates when and how long to decompress, to signify it to him. He shrugged, smiled at me, and started swimming up, still holding me. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, and the thing that helped me react was that my diving computer was telling me to stop and decompress now. I then understood that I was in danger, that if I let him do what he wanted, I would die from the bends. I then started screaming, only to remember that no noise can be heard underwater. I started wiggling frantically as I saw my father and sisters way below me, my diving computer alerting me more and more intensely. At that moment, my father saw us and he reacted. He swam very quickly towards us, and I managed to hit the guy as my dad grabbed my ankle and suddenly dragged me deeper. The guy then quickly swam away. My dad dragged me deeper again, and then we waited for a very long decompression stop to ensure that I would be okay, then start heading towards the surface very slowly and cautiously. On the surface, I started crying frantically and went back to the boat. My father then told me that he thought Marvin was my old instructor, and this was why he wasn't surprised at first. I then told it to my old instructor, who took it more seriously this time, and told me to show him Marvin when he would go up to the surface. Thing is, he never did. The next day on New Year's, we went one last time to the scuba diving club because my little sisters had a diploma to collect, and we saw Charlie. Still choked. I told her what happened with Marvin, and then she stiffed. She told me that Marvin was at the restaurant yesterday for New Year's Eve, and he didn't go scuba diving, which means that guy wasn't Marvin. And at this day, I still don't know who he is, and what he wanted, and why he tried to kill me, maybe twice. So, not Marvin. I still don't know if I'm going to go scuba diving during the upcoming holidays, but if I do, I'll leave you alone with your air failure. In the second half of the 90s, I moved into a rather unusual household situation in Virginia, about a half hour outside of Washington, D.C. It was in a cute town with a little harbor, but I ended up not being able to enjoy it much, if at all, because I was going through some family things and because this household was so strange. A little background. About 6 months prior to moving into this household, I had moved from a southern state up to D.C. to go back to school. My dad had said I could stay with him while in school and even offered to help cover my expenses. Moving in with my dad while in my mid-20s proved to be a terrible idea for a variety of reasons, including that my stepmom expected me to be her buddy when I needed to be studying, and my dad was a control freak who wanted to create a bunch of rules designed to lessen my impact on their lives. Meaning they would choose my groceries, I could never park in the driveway, I could only shower at night, had to sleep on the sofa in the den instead of the guest bedroom, and I couldn't have my small ladies' weight bench set up in their basement or laundry room because it was unsightly. Needless to say, after a few months of this, I was ready to GTFO, and I really didn't care where I went as long as I got away from them. I had left a lower level manager role in broadcast media to return to school, and it was hard to go from being a leader of others to getting $25 a week and spending money from my dad and having him yell at me for parking in the driveway because I came home late and couldn't find the street parking. Now, something weird about me is that I've always felt really comfortable in the company of gay and trans people, to the point where I find comfort being around them. Maybe because my group is in a performing arts high school, included a good number of folks who identified as such, and we all had some pretty intense experiences in school together. Or maybe it's because I've somehow internalized feelings of not knowing my place, because my parents were verbally and emotionally abusive, and the result on the inside is the same. Meaning we've all been through trying to determine where we belong. So, feeling traumatized by the 4th month of living with my dad, I started looking for a place, and I was intentionally looking for a place where I would feel very safe. And even though I'm straight, save for a couple of crushes, I found myself responding to ads for roommates in gay households. At first, I was just looking at anything, but without consciously thinking of it, I started up following up on the gay ones. When I went to the interview for the house I ended up moving into, 2 of the roommates were no-shows for the meeting, so I ended up talking to Sean, the main guy who owned the house. He was a heavy-set guy and very tall with sandy brown hair and a round face. He told me the other 2 roommates were lesbian women and that everybody mostly kept to themselves in the house. He said that each person was kind of low-key and that everyone set up their bedrooms like studio apartments. So, they had their own sitting and TV areas, and they mostly didn't use the living room or basement common areas. He told me they usually cooked their individual food in the kitchen, but ate in their rooms. When he gave me a tour of the house, it was true the bedrooms were huge. The one I saw at least, with space for a desk, as well for a seating group and a bed area, and each room had its own bathroom. The house was a townhouse, so when you entered on the main floor, there was the rarely used living room, a dining room, and a kitchen with a huge fridge. 1 floor down the main floor was the rarely used finished basement with silver wallpaper, black leather furniture, fake red flowers and black vases, and a giant TV. For some reason, the basement creeped me out. The furniture was too big for the space, so the leather pieces were all touching each other, and there was no art on the walls at all, so it looked pretty uninviting. When you went upstairs, there was a floor with 2 bedrooms. One he used as a home office, the other belonged to Annie. 2 more bedrooms were on the floor above that, and one would be mine, across from a woman named Anne. Finally, the top floor, which was entirely the master bedroom and where Sean slept. Sean told me that he had a little business named Chow Call that did food delivery, and it was expanding, so he was really busy all the time and not home much. He also told me that sometimes he slept away from the house because he was the DC booty call for a famous singer whenever he was in town. Initially, I thought that was very odd and creepy, especially because this singer is not at all attractive and is known to be straight, but I had a drink with him once and it turned out to be true. I liked that I would essentially have my own apartment within this house, and to me the fact that everybody kept to themselves seemed initially like a bonus, given that I just wanted to recover from being around my dad. Later though, I would feel weirded out by everyone's constant avoidance of each other. So I moved in, but I have to say that I did so even though I felt Sean seemed to be a little hateful toward women. There had been nothing to demonstrate this. It was just an unexplained vibe I had, as though beneath the surface was a lot of hostility. He struck me as a person who should be a nice guy, based on his outsides, but instead something was wrong inside. We got off to a rocky start because when moving my things in, my dad let Sean's black lab out and refused to let me go find him and bring him back. Sean was naturally pissed and said, "Why did I find my dog wandering around up the road? If you knew me in real life, you know that I'm not meek at all, so this just shows what state I was in, that I didn't just tell my dad to go screw himself and look for the dog myself." Days went by before I met the other roommates, though I would hear them come and go now and then. Finally, one day when I heard somebody in the kitchen, the microwave beeps carried up the staircase. I went down and introduced myself. It was Annie, and we talked a little bit about our backgrounds, what we did, etc. She was a sports writer for a small paper and kind of athletic. I told her about also being a journalist. She was down to earth seeming, but one of those people who, despite being very pleasant, doesn't reveal anything personal in the conversation. Eventually I met Anne, who was a waitress, standoffish and not very talkative, and who reminded me of a tall boyish Mila Kunis. Anyway, life went on. I didn't sign up for classes again. Instead, I took a job in the bookstore and started hanging out with some new friends in the art and music scenes in DC. So I would frequently go out and then crash in the city. Whenever I was home, I felt fine in my room, but the rest of the house felt super cold and uninviting to me, and even being in the kitchen for very long would creep me out. Which is a shame because I love to cook and love to cook for other people, but the culture of the house was such that everybody besides me just ate microwave dinners. Yes, they all ate one brand, and they would call out to each other about the other different flavors if they felt somebody took theirs by mistake, yelling up the stairs, "Annie, did you eat my stuff?" And responding, "No, that was mine." "Anne, you had chicken parmesan." And then Sean said, "No, the parmesan was mine." She had Alfredo. And then back to the first. "No, I had this and that." Blah, 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 blah. Obviously, I wasn't into this, and it just weirded me out that this seemed to be the only thing they communicated with each other about. One time near Christmas, I was in the kitchen making a dish to take to a party. A 50s cheese ball that requires certain spices and finely minced vegetables, and has been something my family has made since I was a kid. So I had ingredients spread all across the counter and was elbow deep in mixing a bowl. Anne came into the room and said, "Can I ask you something?" I felt kind of awkward and said, "Sure." She said, "Are you straight?" And I said that I was for the most part. I asked if that bothered her. She explained she just wondered. She also wanted to know if it felt weird in a gay household. And I told her no, not at all, but the house itself did seem weird to me. Not because of gay roommates, but because of the isolation. I asked her if she felt weird vibes from Sean at all, and she said she did, and that was partly why she stayed in her room a lot. I forgot to mention something. This was before cell phones. It was the 90s, so everybody had their own landline in their room. Shortly after that conversation with Anne is when some weird stuff started going down with the phones. It started with me. I would be getting ready to go out and running late, as I almost always did, and my phone would ring, but nobody would be there. I would always be thinking it was going to be somebody I was meeting or picking up to go to a show or whatever, so I would dash out of the shower and grab the phone only to hear silence. At first, this only happened a couple times a week, but it got to be every time I was going anywhere, even if I had an evening shift at the bookstore. Eventually, I did say "who is this" and stopped calling here, but I tried not to do that very often because I didn't want to give whomever it was the satisfaction. I didn't even want to slam the phone down because that might satisfy them. Even so, it was a huge intrusion and was driving me crazy. Also, they had started to play a song on the phone when they called. Mary Had a Little Lamb by pushing the touch-tone buttons, so I would quietly hang up while they were playing it. Then this started to happen to Anne and Annie. They didn't go out as much, but they did sometimes, and so they got a few calls. But not as many as I did. One day, they were both in the kitchen at the same time when I came in, and I was explaining that I couldn't stand it anymore and was going to change my number. One of them suggested I get caller ID instead so we could find out who it was. This was back when you had to order a little box from the phone company to plug into your phone to see who was calling, so I ordered caller ID and we waited. Weeks went by and no box arrived. Finally, I called the phone company to ask why I hadn't received it. They told me it had been returned unopened. This was news to me. I tried to get to the bottom of that and was transferred to a supervisor. At first, I was infuriated with the phone company, but then the supervisor told me somebody had called and canceled the caller ID order before sending the box back. They said it was somebody named Philip. I was really confused and explained about the harassing calls, and she told me she would have the regional detective call me. Here is where my story is going to seem fake. This guy's name, I kid you not, was Stormy McDonald. I've changed the other names in this story slightly, but this guy was a regional investigator and took a report for me about the harassment. He also told me that though the phone line was in my name, he looked up the address and the house was listed as belonging to somebody named Philip. He also said there were 6 lines registered to the house. I didn't want to wait for a caller ID box anymore. I just wanted to know who the heck kept calling me, so I asked him what his advice was, and he said that for $2 a month I could add 69 to my phone plan and then just call it to find out who called me. To them, whoever I called back, it would look like a regular incoming call and they wouldn't know I called 69 to reach them. So I called the billing department and added that to my bill. Then I just waited to get the next harassing call. Also around this time, I can't remember if it was before or after, I mentioned to Sean that I had told Ann I was straight and did it bother him to have a straight person in the house. I will never forget his words. "Oh, think I'm gay? I'm not. This is just something I do," he said. "I'm going to get married to a woman and have a normal life. This has nothing to do with anything." I asked how that was fair to the woman he would marry, and he said it was none of her business. I decided that this was really outside the realm of what I needed to think or worry about at the moment, and just had a fleeting moment of sadness. I went back to thinking about who might be calling me and counting the days until the next billing cycle when my service would kick in. One day, when nobody was home and I knew that Sean was going to be gone for the weekend, I went into the room that was supposed to be his office. I snooped around but only found siblings related to his business, which had a headquarters in the town proper. I looked around his bedroom but didn't touch anything. Lastly, I went down to the weirdly decorated basement and opened a door that I'd seen during that initial tour of the townhouse. It went to the other half of the basement, the unfinished half, and it was mostly empty except for household repair items and a seemingly broken vacuum. There was a desk down there and a file cabinet. I opened it and it had all the household papers, including a copy of the mortgage and insurance papers, so the house apparently was jointly owned by Sean's parents and somebody named Philip, but that was pretty much all I got out of that. I had no idea who that guy really was and whether he had called the phone company to cancel caller ID or someone pretending to be him had done it. A few days had passed and my 69 thing kicked in. I made sure it worked by having my friends and my sister call me and let me call them back. The next weekend, I was getting ready to go into the city and the call came, and I don't know why, but I was terrified. I let the jerk on the other end play the full Mary Had a Little Lamb before I hung up quietly, and then I sat in the chair by the phone trying to get up the courage to call. I knew I would just hang up once I heard the voice, but the idea of someone saying hello and it being the person who had been calling me for months was really scary for some reason. Then I got mad again and picked up the phone and dialed. This was the answer. "Chow call, can I help you?" I dropped the phone like it was on fire. Then I grabbed it and hung up. Then I grabbed the receiver and dialed again. "Is Sean there?" I asked. The person who answered said something like, "Let me see if he's around." When he came to the phone, I started yelling at him, saying, "Dude, you frickin' jerk. Why have you been calling me?" He tried to play it off, saying he had no idea what I was talking about and was pretty convincing in his denials, making me wonder if the phone lines had crossed or there was some misfire. And I was saying things like, "This isn't even your house. It's Philip's, and you sent my caller ID back." And honestly, I was so angry I don't remember what else I said except for, "Leave me alone, you sexist asshole." So then I locked my bedroom door and called one of my guy friends to ask him to come to me. This was a dumb idea, of course, because he was far away and I had to wait, whereas if I had just gotten in my car, I would be gone. I then left my room and went and told Ann and Annie, who had heard me yelling, that it had been Sean, and they both seemed sufficiently creeped out for me to think they weren't somehow involved. We all started talking about moving. About 20 minutes later, we heard the front door slam open and Sean came rushing up the stairs 2 at a time. calling out in this booming and angry voice, "Where the heck is she? Little Miss Nancy Drew." And he found us all on the landing, but came toward me in such a red-faced, scary way that I backed up the stairs until I was almost at the top near the master bedroom. He was yelling at me and kept denying making the calls and said he had no answer for that. When I asked why 69 went back to his business, Anne and Annie were pissed too, but tried to calm everybody down, and they asked some questions, but he seemed less angry at them and super angry at me. It made me mad because he is the one who was doing something wrong, but weirdly, I felt like a troublemaker who had disrupted the entire house. He said if you don't like it here, then leave, and I said there is no question I am leaving. Who acts like this? For some reason, I have no memory of the time between that enormous flight of the stairs and a tiny moment of my last day there 2.5 weeks later when I walked out of my empty room for the last time. Everything I've included here is what I remember in total, and I have no memory of most of the days there, except brief memories of going for drinks with the famous person and going for drinks one time with Annie and Anne and having an okay time. I've tried looking Sean up, but I don't remember his last name, and I've tried looking Philip up under his real name, and have only found real estate records but nothing else. Maybe he was an older uncle or something. I'm not sure if I've adequately expressed it, but the whole time I was there, I felt a feeling of dread underneath every interaction, and for some reason, I still feel that dread when I think about that household and those people. I traveled to Toronto back in August for work and was there for a full week, including the weekend. Typically, when I travel for work, we are working through the weekend, but this was a smaller project and I had downtime on Saturday and Sunday. Sweet time to explore. I'd walked much of the city Saturday late morning, and after a beer and a nap, went out again that evening. While at the waterfront, there was a live band, outdoor seating, great photo ops, and a cool atmosphere, so I decided to sit by the lake and enjoy the evening and people watch. For some context, I'm a small woman, probably under 5 feet on a good day, and barely 100 pounds with full ski gear on. Travel a lot, and so I try to pay attention to my surroundings and be cautious, especially since I'm often alone. So here I am, hanging out by the water, and there's a giant chartered yacht that a group had rented for a booze cruise. They were boisterous and having a great time, and while they boarded, the 2 captains of the charter were near me waiting. I tried to take a photo of myself with the CN tower in the back, so one of them offered to take it for me. Total tourist move, I know. They take the picture and start chatting, asking questions about me, etc. Nice enough, so other than the white lie I told my spouse and friends that they were waiting for me, the conversation was fairly straightforward. Cut to them inviting me on the yacht to hang out with them in the wheelhouse for the journey. I didn't think that was a stellar idea. I had no idea how long they would be gone and I felt super uncomfortable about it, so I declined to take in the great views and the food made by the chef on board. This is when they started getting pushy. Oh, come on, it'll be way more fun than dinner with your friends. You'll never get an opportunity like this again. Come with us. The food is going to be way better here anyway. Again, I declined, thanked them for taking my photo, and stood to leave. It was at this point I realized they were blocking my exit. One side of the dock went straight to the lake, and my exit route was past them on the other side. They were both standing and blocking the path. I start walking toward, but off to the side of them, and one of the guys sidesteps to get in front of me while still trying to convince me. Then, as I try to pass him again, he stays in front of me but walks backwards for a few steps until I say goodbye, excuse me. They looked mad, but the second guy shook his head and muttered, "Bitch," under his breath as I walked away. Glad I didn't take them up on the offer, because of the implications. So, creepy captains, let's not meet. During the height of COVID, I, 20 female, decided to get some fresh air after work and go for a walk at a nearby trail that parallels a side road and a highway. The parking lot for this section of the trail is very small, with only 3 parking spots in the lot. When I pulled in, there was a black Suburban already there in the middle spot, so I parked to the right of it and stayed in my car texting, browsing Reddit, essentially procrastinating my walk. After a few minutes, a man in his mid-30s gets out of the black Suburban and opens the hood of his car and makes multiple trips back and forth from the hood to his trunk, seemingly looking for something. Each time he passes between our cars, and I can feel him looking inside at me as he passes my window. I become uneasy with the man, so I resolve to not get out until he's gone. About 15 minutes pass of him continuing to look in the hood of his car, walking to his trunk and passing between our cars while trying to catch my attention. I avoid eye contact throughout. Now, I was going through something in my life at that time that in this moment put me in the mindset of I'm not going to let my discomfort with this man get in the way of me living my life, while simultaneously convincing myself that I'm probably overthinking anyways, overanalyzing and assuming the worst when this guy is probably just a normal dude. After my internal debate was over, I resolved to get out of my car and go for my walk. Immediately after I get out, I ask him if he's having trouble with his car, and he says no. My logic in talking to him is to feel him out to decide whether it is safe to embark on a solo walk with this guy who would see exactly where I went. Mistake number 1. His car had some sort of government tags, which made me more at ease, and I asked about the tags, to which he gave a long-winded explanation I don't remember. He then said, "Can I have a hug?" And I know this is very stupid of me, but I was so isolated feeling during COVID that I figured he felt the same and that we somehow recognized that. I was so desperate for human contact and I said sure. Very, very stupid, I know. Mistake number 2. It's October, so we were both wearing coats. Mine was long and went down to my calves but was unzipped. When we hugged, his hands and arms went inside my jacket around my waist instead of hugging me outside my coat. Once his hands were in, he quickly proceeded to feel my body, down from my waist to my butt. I immediately pulled away and said, "That was weird, I'm going on my walk now." I was panicked but didn't want to do anything that would make him act with urgency and escalate the situation. He was upset when I pulled away from our hug and asked if I wanted to hang out later. Ew. And he suggested that we add each other on Snapchat. Again, I didn't want to upset him, so I let him request to add me. I know, so stupid. Mistake number 3. After that, I immediately said, "Okay, I'm going for my walk now. Bye." I should have gotten in my car and noped out of there. Mistake number 4. I speed walked out of view and instantly wish I had gotten in my car, as I now had no idea where this guy could be. My skin starts to crawl and I feel very much in danger out there in the woods. I sprinted through some dense bushes and crouched down so I was out of view. My heart was racing. About 30 seconds later, he came running along the trail frantically trying to catch up to me. I stayed off of the trail and ran through the woods to some thick bushes by the parking lot and stayed there a while to make sure the coast was clear back to my car. Not long after, the man returns to his car, gets in, turns on the engine, and drives down the side road that parallels the trail. He slowly drives back and forth on the side road, turning around and starting over probably 3 times, seemingly looking for me at the points I'd have been along the trail if I had been steadily walking since the time I started my walk. After about 5 minutes of my heart beating out of my chest, as I watched this creep search for me, he gives up and turns onto the highway and speeds off in the opposite direction from where he said he lived. The second he was out of sight, I sprinted to my car as fast as I could and couldn't believe what had just happened. I drove home in a silent state of shock and numbness and haven't let myself think about it too much ever since. Freaking terrifying. I can let myself acknowledge that now. I hope somebody can learn from the mistakes I made during this encounter. So, stay safe out there, everyone. After reading a few dozen Let's Not Meet posts, I was chatting with my mom on my lunch break and asked her if she had any creepy tales. I'm not nearly as good of a storyteller as she is, but these are the stories. My mom grew up in an urban town right on the ocean. Not quite a city, but about as close as you can get. This was back in the 60s though, so kids could just kind of roam around and nobody thought twice about it. My mom's best friend growing up was a little girl named Joyce. My mom and I are both darker-skinned Italians and not exactly what you would call petite, but Joyce was the opposite. She was small and slender with blonde hair. One night, when my mom was about 9 and Joyce was 7 or 8, they were taking a walk along the beach when they saw this guy hanging out there. His name was Carlos, and he was kind of a sketchy old dude. I guess he just hung out at the beach a lot, so neither of the girls were alarmed to see him there and had no reason to be wary of him. As they were walking by though, Carlos called out to Joyce, "I'll give you a dime if you lift up your skirt." "Oh no," he said. "You have to pull your underwear down and then lift up your skirt." At this point, it finally occurred to my mom and Joyce that something about this was off and they both went home. Of course, the first thing my mom did was tell my grandma what happened. My grandma was a strong, intimidating lady back then. Still is actually. Fresh off the boat from Sicily. If you ask her how they handled conflicts back in the old country, she'll tell you. In Italy, they're nice. They used the gun. In Sicily, we used the knife. and she would punctuate this by dragging her finger under her jawline where, the knife would go. So naturally, my grandma marched down to the beach to tell Carlos what she would do to him if he ever talked to her daughter again. My mom's not entirely sure what was said, but we've got a pretty good idea. My mom and Joyce never saw Carlos hanging out around after that. My childhood was a little less eventful, thankfully, but one story she told me sent chills down my spine. When my mom was a little girl, her greatest dream was to be a ballerina. My Italian grandparents were poor and cranky, so my mom never got a chance to act upon her dream. When I turned 2 and was old enough to stuff into a tutu, she had her chance. She had the time of her life buying me all of my dance gear. I was 2 and signing me up for a ballet class at a local dance studio. Much to my mother's disappointment, though, I spent the entirety of the first class clinging to her leg. I wasn't having any of it, and I did not want to be there. She took this as a sign that she shouldn't have been forcing her dreams on me anyway, and we never went back. It was a week or 2 later that my mom saw the same dance studio on the news. 2 13-year-old girls who had been enrolled in the dance classes there stepped forward and confessed that the husband of the dance instructor had been assaulting them. Not just once or twice, but for years. In that magical, intuitive way that only little kids seem to know things, I must have had a feeling about that place, and I had let my mom know. Or, it could have been that itchy tutu. Maybe both. I grew up in a village near Munich in southern Germany. It was maybe the safest and most peaceful place on earth, with a few young families fleeing the stupid rents in the city and a few elderly people. Close to my parents' house, there was a little nature conservation area, maybe around 2 to 3 kilometers in size, with a forest and a few little lakes. Entrance isn't forbidden, but there is no path leading deeper into the area, and it can be quite overgrown and wet, so normally nobody would go deeper inside. However, I've always had an interest for somehow wild natural places like that, and when I was allowed to play outside alone, I soon started exploring it and it became my favorite playground. One day, I found a small clearing deep inside the forest, covered by a flower meadow. In late summer, it just looked like paradise itself. Over the next years, I came there whenever I wanted to be alone, when I needed time for reading, dreaming, drawing, and when I grew older, also sunbathing and other stuff. During all the time, I never told anybody about it, and I never saw a single sign of other people there. The meadow was my secret, and I felt as safe as home. Years later, I came there just for some reading and sunbathing at the meadow, and since I never saw anyone else there, I mostly stayed topless while doing so. I must have fallen asleep, and when I woke up, I saw an old, maybe 50 man, sitting directly beside me. He was maybe 1.8 meters in height, dressed in light outdoor clothing, and, had a camera hanging around his neck. I got the shock of my life. Yelled and tried somehow to cover myself, but all my clothes were out of my reach, so all I could do was press myself on the ground. He himself was just sitting there, looking at me and telling me how beautiful I am and how glad he is to see me again. I asked him to turn around and to allow me to get my clothes, but he said, "No, you really don't need to be ashamed, and I just want to chat a bit." The man told about his wife and asked casual questions. Where do you live? What's your name? How is school going? What about the boys? Stuff like that. At first, I answered a bit monosyllabically, hoping that he would leave me alone, but he clearly had no intention to do that. After a few minutes, he even asked if I would allow him to shoot some more pictures of me because I looked like a nympho and he would like to preserve me forever. Of course, I refused, and now something has changed in his behavior. His whole appearance became harder, and he said it with a creepy, cold voice, and I will never forget this sentence. "You are really stupid for a naked girl all alone in a forest." At this point, I became very scared, jumped up and ran into the forest, leaving all of my stuff behind. He didn't try to follow me, but was just sitting there and left. I came back after lurking around for about 2 hours to get my stuff. He was gone and left most things behind, except for my shirt and bikini top. I grabbed all of my stuff, tried to cover myself with my skirt, and ran home as fast as I could. Never told my parents, but after that, I never visited the meadow again. I didn't even realize how messed up this was at the time, but looking back, I feel kind of lucky. I haven't really had many encounters like this in my life. I'm a chubby male, so creepers tend to leave me alone. When I was 19, I lived in Kentucky pretty far from my northern Michigan hometown. It was this little town called Pikeville where there was very little crime. I actually kind of miss it and want to go back, but I digress. My family came down to visit me for my birthday that year, and we agreed to meet up at the Hardys in town the morning after they got into town. I got there a lot earlier than them, he being the type to show up 15 minutes early and them being the types who show up way late. As I was standing outside waiting, this guy walks up to me. If you ever lived in a place like this, you know everybody is super friendly usually, so it didn't strike me as odd when he started talking to me. During our conversation, all kinds of alarm bells should have been going off. Like after he found out I went to the college, he said he saw me at a party. This is impossible as I never once went to a party. When he found out I'm a gamer nerd, he started talking about playing D&D all the time. He kept taking sips out of some sort of alcohol bottle. Mind you, it's like 10 a.m. at this point and kept offering me some. There were a few other things like this. He started talking about how he lost all of his friends because he got into drugs, and I felt a little bad for him. He asked if I wanted to walk around for a bit, and since I knew my family wouldn't be there for a while, I went. This guy had been talking about how he lost all of his friends due to drugs, and I felt bad for the guy. That, coupled with the fact that I hadn't had any encounters like this and a lack of crime, kind of disarmed that warning part of my brain. We walked and talked for a little while, maybe 10 minutes, before I realized we were in a shady looking part of town. I had never even realized there were shady parts of this small town, but here we were. We stopped in front of a house that looked long abandoned with this dark, narrow, sketchy alley next to it. He starts talking about how he knows 2 girls that live here and they like to party and whatnot. He tells me about how DTF they are and asks if I want to meet them. It was at this point that my common sense finally kicks in. I'm in a crappy part of town with this sketchy guy I don't know who was just talking about doing hard drugs, and nobody knows I'm here. And now he wants me to go to an obviously abandoned house under the guise of meeting some ladies. I obviously declined his offer and immediately said I needed to get back as my family was probably waiting. He seemed a little bit upset about this and then asked if I could help him move a pool table into his van, which was conveniently parked down the alley. I declined this as well. This is when he got to reach into his pocket jacket. Since those bells started going off, I realized just how much this guy looked like he might stab me, and this terrified me. At that moment, my stepmom did the only kind thing she ever did for me. She called me to see where I was. I took this as an opportunity to hastily exit. The creep followed me for 3 blocks. I don't know what exactly this guy wanted, but it was probably just to rob me. Still, that area had a good amount of disappearances and is one of the worst places in the country for human trafficking. I don't know what would have happened had I agreed to help, but I can't help but think of one of the scenes from Silence of the Lambs where Bill lures a victim into his van. I hope he got the help he needed and is doing better, but it also helped just as much that I never have the misfortune of running into him again.